Today, we are peering through the pixels of one of the most sophisticated and frankly terrifying espionage operations happening right now.
Right.
We're talking about foreign state actors getting inside Western companies, but not through the usual methods, not through firewalls or 0 days. They're just walking in the front door.
Well, the digital front door, the
For-
HR portal.
Exactly.
And this is a huge shift in the threat landscape. I mean, for years we've been tracking North Korea's cyber activity, but this is different. They're leveraging the whole remote work boom and now generative AI to turn this into an industrialized state-sponsored campaign.
It's economic warfare disguised as a job application.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled together a really critical stack of sources. We have internal government advisories, FBI, Treasury. We've got detailed DOJ indictments against some of the people helping them, and threat reports from major security firms.
And they all point to the same conclusion, which is pretty chilling. The remote hiring process itself is now the main exploit surface. It's the most vulnerable part of the company.
The primary actor here, as you said, is North Korea, the DPRK. They're using these incredibly skilled IT operatives, and now with AI and even real-time deepfakes, they've just scaled this thing up exponentially.
It's a machine that exploits trust to generate cash and to spy.
Okay, so what's our mission for today's deep dive? What are we trying to unpack for you?
We need to break down the mechanics of this. First, the why, the deep financial pressure that's driving Pyongyang. Then we map out the tactics, especially how these deepfakes can beat a normal video interview.
And finally, what companies can actually do about it. The mitigation strategies, because this isn't some theoretical risk, is it?
No, this is an active, ongoing threat. And it comes with immense legal liability if you get it wrong.
The stakes are just incredibly high. We saw this shocking prediction in one of the reports we reviewed. Over the next 3 years, up to 25%, 1 in 4 of all job candidates globally could be entirely fake.
1 in 4. Just think about that.
If 1 in 4 people applying for a job is a complete fabrication, the entire foundation of trust in hiring just collapses.
It does. And that's the scale of the problem we're looking at. So let's start at the beginning. The root cause. It's all about the money.
Right. We have to establish the why before we really dig into the how, because this doesn't sound like your typical cybercrime gang just trying to make a quick buck.
Oh, absolutely not. This is a state-level financial and strategic imperative. It's driven by Pyongyang, orchestrated from the very top.
And the goal is just hard currency.
Hard currency, US dollars, euros, crypto, anything they can use to bypass the really stringent international sanctions that have, cut off almost all of their legitimate income.
And can we be really clear about that link? I mean, are we talking specific government agencies running this?
Yes, the sources are very clear on this. This isn't some side hustle. This is tied directly to key parts of the regime, specifically Office 39 of the Korean Workers' Party.
Office 39. Isn't that the one that manages the slush funds for the elites?
That's the one. Beyond that, they name specific IT worker delegations, like the Kyonhung IT Exchange Company. So the connection to the government's financial machine is it's an established fact for law enforcement.
So what are they funding with all this illicit cash?
And that's the most destabilizing part of this entire thing. This money, these salaries, are systematically used to fund the DPRK's most dangerous projects.
Don't tell me.
Alongside their now famous crypto heists, which have netted them over $3 billion in just the past few years, these IT wages go directly into their weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs.
Wow. So every single salary payment made by some unsuspecting company in, say, Silicon Valley?
Is being filtered directly into the military machine. It's funding missile development.
That completely redefines the damage, doesn't it? An American tech firm unwittingly becomes a financial enabler for a major national security threat.
Exactly.
So just how lucrative is this operation? What are we talking in terms of numbers?
The scale is immense. Collectively, our sources say these remote IT schemes generate hundreds of millions of dollars collectively each year.
Hundreds of millions.
And they get there because the salaries they target are high. An individual DPRK IT worker can land a job paying up to $300,000 a year.
For a single remote position.
For a single high-value position. Think cloud architecture, specialized software development, things that command a premium.
$300,000, that's a competitive salary even in a place like San Francisco. But the worker doesn't see that money, right? The regime steps in.
Precisely. This is where the logistics get really sophisticated. Pyongyang withholds an estimated 90% of that money.
90.
90. The individual worker, they keep just a tiny fraction, barely enough for basic living expenses, just enough to keep them motivated to continue working.
So how is that 90% seizure even managed? I mean, the money's being paid into a U.S. bank account, presumably.
It is, and that's where the facilitator comes in, who we'll talk about more later. But essentially, the facilitator in the U.S. gets the money into a local account. From there, the vast majority is siphoned off through these state-controlled remittance channels.
Money laundering, basically.
The very sophisticated form of it, yeah. They use virtual currency exchanges, complex front companies in China and Russia. The worker is just a state-taxed financial pipeline.
And that reinforces the legal problem for the company paying the salary.
It does. It means that legally, almost every dollar paid is considered material support for a sanctioned regime. And as we'll get into, that carries massive, massive legal consequences for the employer.
So if the original goal was purely financial, to plant what you called a wage mole,
Yeah.
what's the strategic shift we're seeing now, especially with AI entering the picture?
Well, they've evolved. They've gone from being simple revenue generators to sophisticated dual-purpose assets.
Dual purpose.
Yeah. The first goal is still to collect the paycheck. But now, once they're in, their mandate expands. They are deployed as internal reconnaissance platforms. They start gathering intelligence.
So they go from rogue employee to full-on intelligence asset. How would you classify that kind of threat once they're inside?
Immediately, that person has to be classified as an advanced persistent threat, an APT. But, and this is the critical part, they're an APT with pre-authorized legitimate credentials.
Right. They didn't have to phish anyone. They didn't have to find a vulnerability.
They walked in the front door.
Yeah.
They were given a badge, laptop, full access to Slack, to the code repositories. It just compounds the risks so far beyond the lost salary.
That really is the ultimate insider threat scenario. It bypasses every single perimeter defense you could build.
It does.
So what does that internal recon look like? What are they looking for once they've established themselves?
They're mapping everything. The internal network, key data stores, they're figuring out the data governance policies, and most importantly, they are hunting for high-value intellectual property. IP.
So trade secrets?
Trade secrets, proprietary hone, weaknesses in firewalls. We've seen documented cases where they just copy entire repositories of source code, the stuff that's often far more valuable than the paycheck itself.
And they're targeting specific sectors to do this, right? It's not random.
Not at all. It's opportunistic, but they definitely prioritize high-value remote jobs where the data is rich and the money is good. Think software development, gaming companies.
Gaming? Why gaming?
Cutting-edge gaming companies have incredibly valuable code and trade secrets, and then, of course, fintech and virtual currency projects.
Ah, virtual currency seems like a prime target.
It's a double whammy for them. They can earn a salary in hard currency, and then they can use their inside access to help manage, remit, and launder other illicit funds back to the DPRK. We saw that case where one stole over $900,000 from a blockchain company in Atlanta. They go where the money, the data, and the vulnerable systems all meet. So the reason this is scaled up to hundreds of millions of dollars, it all comes down to the weaponization of generative AI. It gives them the operational maturity to just mass produce these convincing fake identities.
And these identities are good enough to beat the kind of vetting most HR departments do.
Especially high-volume HR departments, exactly.
So how is Gen AI used across the whole application process? It has to be more than just, writing a good cover letter.
Oh, it's every layer of the deception. AI is used to build these synthetic personas from the ground up. It creates convincing images. It can fabricate professional-looking documents. It tailors all the application materials.
I remember some of the older scams. You could spot them a mile away. Weird grammar, awkward phrasing in the resume.
Right, the signs of a non-native speaker.
Has AI basically solved that problem for them?
It has almost completely solved it. Their fake resumes now are polished. They often have zero grammatical errors, none of those cultural tripwires that used to be red flags. They're using large language models to make sure the language is nuanced and perfectly tailored to the job description.
So that forces HR to look past the simple stuff and focus on much harder to spot signals.
It does. And the single most vulnerable piece of tech in HR today is the applicant tracking system, the ATS.
The software that filters all the resumes?
That's their main exploit surface. And they treat it like a system to be gamed. They use AI optimization tools to make sure their fake resumes get a perfect score from the ATS algorithms.
Wait, they're actually testing this?
The preparation is incredible. Our sources show they practice what they call mock ATS testing. They'll set up fake companies or use third-party services that simulate corporate hiring algorithms to see what works.
So they're literally reverse engineering the hiring technology of their targets. That's a whole other level of operational maturity.
It shows you they see the Western hiring process not as a hurdle, but as a strategic system to be mapped and optimized for high throughput.
To get as many fake candidates through the filter as possible?
Exactly. They figure out which keywords score best, which formats work, how to get past all the automated checks that weed out 90% of normal applicants.
And the end result is a synthetic profile with what looks like a flawless digital footprint. LinkedIn, GitHub, all of it.
All of it. They build detailed profiles, sometimes with fake contribution histories on sites like GitHub, all designed to get them past that initial screening and get them an interview. The deepfake is just the final tool to get them past the last human gatekeeper.
Okay, so the shift to remote video calls was the vulnerability, and now the deepfake interview is the exploit. Let's talk about the tech here, because this is pretty sophisticated stuff.
The sophistication it's hard to grasp until you see it. We're not talking about some choppy, pre-recorded video of someone else.
Right.
We are talking about real-time deepfake video technology. The person you see on your screen, the candidate, is an AI-generated face, a digital puppet, and it's being manipulated live to perfectly match the imposter's voice and lip movements.
Why is that real-time part so much more dangerous?
Because it defeats spontaneous interaction. If you just send a pre-recorded video, the recruiter can ask an unexpected question and break the script.
But with a real-time deepfake.
The operative in, say, China, can speak into a microphone, and the AI instantly applies his lip movements and speech to the deepfake avatar on the screen. The American hiring manager sees a completely different person speaking.
So the operative doesn't even need to have the right accent. The avatar does all the cultural mimicry for them.
It does. Security researchers call this the logical evolution of the scheme. It's using AI to get past that final, really difficult barrier of human verification.
And I imagine this helps them scale up their attempts massively.
The efficiency gain is stunning. Think about it. One operative can now interview for the same job multiple times using different fake faces. They just switch out the deepfake avatar.
So they can run a dozen applications at once for different companies all at the same time.
Maximizing their chances of success. That's how they're hitting hundreds of companies simultaneously.
And the quality of these fakes is getting better all the time, which means just relying on the human eye is becoming a useless defense.
It's already almost useless. The quality gap between what's real and what's synthetic is narrowing so fast. The old tricks, looking for blurry edges or bad lip syncing, they're obsolete. These new deepfakes are incredibly good.
So if the AI is this good and the deception is happening live, what's the defense? How does a company fight back against a technology that can create a believable human identity in real time?
The defense has to be about breaking their script. You have to implement dynamic, unpredictable verification. You can't just passively watch them on screen anymore.
You have to force them to do something the AI can't simulate well.
Exactly. Something that exposes the latency or the technical seams of the deception.
But hold on, if these are state-level operations, won't they just train their AI models to do the simple things like wave a hand in front of their face? Is that just a temporary fix?
That's a great question. And yeah, it speaks to how fast companies need to adapt. Yes, eventually the models will learn simple, predictable actions, but the key right now is unscripted and dynamic action combined with speed.
Give me an example.
Ask the applicant to quickly turn their profile to the camera, show both of their hands clearly, or even ask them to hold up a random object from their desk at an unexpected angle.
To test how the AI renders complex objects and shadows in real time?
You're trying to force the model to calculate physics and geometry under pressure. That still causes noticeable glitches, artifacts, or frame rate drops that a trained eye can spot.
So it's about pushing the tech to its limits to expose the flaws? What about just unscripted conversation?
That's also critical. Ask unscripted questions that require immediate local knowledge. Ask them about the weather outside their window right now. Reference a specific local news event from that morning. Talk about the local sports team's game last night. You're testing if they're really where they claim to be.
Or if there's a delay while they quickly Google the answer.
Right. That hesitation can be enough to expose the proxy.
And beyond these behavioral tests, what about technical tools?
Companies need to deploy technical suites that are analyzing the video feed in real time. These tools look for the subtle things the human eye misses.
Like what?
Irregular, non-human blinking patterns. Tiny jitters or pixelation around the edges of the face where the fake image meets the background. And crucially, tiny audio-visual sync issues. Even a few milliseconds of lag between the audio and the lip movement is a huge red flag that a real-time deepfake is running. So the deepfake gets the North Korean IT worker the job offer. But the operative themselves, they're physically located in a sanctioned country, usually China or Russia.
Right. They can't get paid directly or use their real location.
So this whole thing depends on a critical link in the chain. U.S.-based individuals, the facilitators.
And why are these facilitators in the U.S. so absolutely essential to the whole scheme?
They're the bridge. They solve the geography and compliance problems, they provide a local presence, but their most important job is sanctions, evasion, and money laundering.
So they use their own genuine U.S. identity, their bank accounts, their address.
All of it. They receive the salary payments into their own legitimate U.S. bank accounts.
They're basically a clean local identity that's used to cleanse the transaction.
Exactly. It completely subverts the OFAC controls. On paper, it just looks like a normal salary payment to a U.S. resident. But then that money gets funneled overseas.
It's a fundamental exploit of the trust built into the U.S. financial system. Do we know how much damage these facilitators have done?
The scale is staggering. Law enforcement is actively going after these people. We've seen cases where facilitators pled guilty to helping defraud more than 136 U.S. companies, generating over $2 million for North Korea. In another huge case, a U.S. citizen was convicted for helping them infiltrate over 300 American companies.
300 companies from one facilitator network.
And that single network earned the regime over $17 million in illicit revenue.
It just shows how a single domestic node can support a massive international espionage campaign.
And that's just what's been caught. It shows a highly organized criminal network that is completely reliant on U.S. logistics to get around sanctions.
Okay, so to maintain this illusion of a U.S.-based worker and to get the company laptop, they use something called a laptop farm. What does that actually look like?
It's pretty much what it sounds like. It's a physical location, often just a house or a small office run by the facilitator, and it's filled with rows of company-issued laptops.
Just sitting on shelves.
Yeah. Law enforcement has raided at least 29 of these suspected farms across 16 states. The entire point is location obfuscation. It gives the company a persistent, compliant U.S. IP address for the device. It makes it look like the worker is in, say, Phoenix, when they're actually in Dandong, China.
So the company ships the laptop to the facilitator's address, and then the operative in China takes over remotely. How do they maintain that connection without IT getting suspicious?
The facilitator's first job is to unbox the laptop, sign in, and install remote monitoring and management software. RMM tools, things like TeamViewer, AnyDesk, JumpConnect.
Tools that are pretty common in corporate IT, so they might not raise an immediate red flag.
Right, but the sources point to something much more specialized that should be a huge red flag for any IT team paying attention.
Okay, what's that?
To get maximum reliability, they heavily rely on specialized IP-based KVM devices, keyboard, video, mouse devices, specifically things like a tiny pilot or a PEG KVM.
A physical piece of hardware? Why would they bother with that when RMM software is so much easier? What's the advantage of a KVM?
RMM software runs on top of the operating system. It can be monitored, it can be blocked by corporate security tools like an EDR, but a KVM device provides hardware-level access.
It bypasses the OS completely.
Completely. If the computer crashes, if the RMM software gets blocked by security, the KVM connection stays up. Because to the computer, it just thinks a real keyboard, mouse, and monitor are physically plugged into it. It guarantees that stable, low-latency control they need for a full day of coding across thousands of miles.
So an IT team needs to be looking for more than just weird software installations. They need to look for the network traffic of an unauthorized KVM.
Exactly. Your EDR might see the RMM software get installed, but it's often blind to the traffic from a hardware KVM. IT security has to be specifically looking at network logs for unusual, continuous, high-volume traffic going to the kinds of IP addresses that these KVM relays use.
It's an arms race. They move to hardware to get around the software monitoring.
It always is.
And the final piece of the puzzle is just looking like you're working all day.
Correct. The ITWs are operating from China or Russia, using high-end VPNs like Astral to mask their traffic. But to appear active during U.S. business hours, sometimes across multiple fake profiles at once, they use automation.
And this includes mouse jiggling software. I saw the name for one was Caffeine.
That's the one.
So wait a minute, we have a state-sponsored espionage campaign using deepfakes and advanced hardware KVMs. And the final critical step is a piece of freeware designed to wiggle the mouse cursor.
It sounds absurd, but it's the perfect illustration of how they operate. High-tech infiltration combined with low-tech deception. The mouse jiggler just makes sure their status on Slack or Teams never shows as away.
So they can maximize the billable hours that the regime collects.
Exactly. It's that blend of extreme sophistication and mundane, simple tricks that makes this whole threat so effective.
Okay, we've mapped the logistics. Let's talk about the fallout, the catastrophe. Once they're inside, you said their mission shifts from just collecting a salary to being an APT. What's the real damage for a company that gets hit?
Well, beyond just losing the salary payments, the consequences really fall into three main buckets. There's data theft, direct financial theft, and then extortion.
Let's start with the data theft, the espionage risk.
Right, so the primary non-financial risk is just the systematic theft of your intellectual property. Remember, these are skilled developers with deep, trusted access.
They're not just some random person who clicked a phishing link.
No, they've been observed, time and again, copying entire company code repositories from GitHub or internal servers, and then just exfiltrating them to personal cloud accounts. They target everything from export-controlled military tech at defense contractors to proprietary algorithms at fintech firms.
So that's just corporate suicide. If your core IP gets stolen, what about the direct financial exploitation?
Yeah, that crypto theft we mentioned is a perfect example. The IT worker used his trusted credentials to get into the company's internal wallets, and he actually modified the code to let him transfer out over $900,000.
So they're not just coders, they're financial criminals too.
They're sophisticated enough to execute complex laundering schemes with the money they steal on the inside.
And what's the worst case scenario? What happens when the company figures it out and detects them?
This is where it gets really nasty. The DPRK has a well-documented strategy for this. They call it monetization of failure.
Monetization of failure.
Extortion. If the IT...
So what's the core issue?
The issue is that paying a salary to a North Korean IT worker is a direct violation of U.S. sanctions. Full stop. Because those funds, no matter how small, are proven to directly support the DPRK's WMD and missile programs. OFAC explicitly forbids it.
But I'm sure most companies would argue they had no idea they were tricked by deepfakes and facilitators. Is ignorance a valid defense here?
Crucially, no. Ignorance is not a defense. This is the key. OFAC sanctions can be enforced for civil penalties under a strict liability regime.
Okay, what does strict liability actually mean in this context?
It means a company can be held civilly liable, they can face massive fines, potentially millions of dollars, even if they were completely unaware of the worker's true identity and had zero intent to violate sanctions. The crime is simply making the prohibited payment. That's it.
That is a staggering level of exposure. You don't have to be negligent or malicious. You just have to have paid the salary.
That's the prohibited act.
Can you give me a hypothetical of how that would land on a typical tech company?
Sure. Imagine a mid-sized software firm hires 10 remote developers. Turns out 2 of them were DPRK operatives. If OFAC finds out, they calculate the total value of all the illegal payments, all the salaries paid over, say, 18 months, and then they assess a civil penalty based on that.
And because the government has been warning everyone about this.
The fine is likely to be much closer to the statutory maximum per violation. We're talking multi-million-dollar penalties, regardless of the company's good intentions. The bar for due diligence has been set incredibly high by the government.
This is why we're hearing so much about this idea of know your employee, or KYE. It's becoming mandatory.
It has to be. The strict liability standard forces companies to adopt KYE procedures that are just as rigorous as the Know Your Customer KYC and anti-money laundering AML rules in banking.
Right. A bank has to know who its customers are.
And now, a company hiring a remote worker has to know, with certainty, who their employee is, where they are, and who they're actually paying. HR vetting is no longer an administrative task. It's high-stakes compliance risk management.
And the risk is compounded by the fact that federal agencies have been shouting about this for years.
The constant public warnings from the FBI, CISA, the Treasury, they establish a well-documented standard of care. If your company gets hit and you haven't implemented the red flags and protocols from those advisories, a regulator could argue that's a form of negligence. It just makes the penalties worse.
What about outsourcing? If a company uses a third-party staffing agency, can they just push the liability onto them?
Nope. Outsourcing provides zero immunity from sanctions liability. The ultimate exposure often stays with the company that's making the final salary payment or receiving the benefit of the services.
So you have to audit your vendors.
You have to. You need ironclad contracts that force your staffing vendors to use the same rigorous KYE protocols, and then you have to actually audit them to make sure they're doing it. Trusting a third party blindly is just a fast track to a huge sanctions violation.
So we've established that HR teams are now on the front line of this. They are the security gatekeepers, responsible for preventing this existential risk. But that's a huge shift, isn't it? I mean, is it realistic to ask HR staff to act like counterintelligence officers?
It is a huge ask, but the alternative facing those strict liability fines is much worse. But the focus isn't on turning HR into IT security experts. It's about training them to spot the identity anomalies, the behavioral red flags.
The flaws in the fake persona.
Exactly. They're detecting the social engineering part of the attack.
Okay, so let's run through that checklist of red flags from the federal advisories. Let's start with number 1, inconsistent digital footprints.
Right. The AI is good at making one perfect resume, but it often struggles to maintain consistency across different platforms over time. So HR needs to actually cross-reference the resume against LinkedIn, against a portfolio site like GitHub.
Then what are they looking for?
Mismatches. A resume might list some incredibly advanced job, but their LinkedIn profile is sparse, has no endorsements, or the dates don't quite line up. That's a sign of fabrication.
That takes time, though. Something high-volume recruiters don't have a lot of.
It does, which means the diligence process has to be standardized and mandatory. Next, red flag 2. Recycled contact information.
So using the same phone number or email for different people?
Exactly. The operatives often reuse the same VoIP line or email to manage logistics for a whole team of ITWs. Recruiters need tools to cross-check contact details across every application they receive, even for different names.
Okay, red flag 3, reluctance on camera. This seems like a big one.
It's critical. Refusing to use a camera or always using a virtual background to hide their surroundings is a massive warning sign. If they say they're in a home office, they should be able to show you.
And what if they refuse?
It should be a hard stop. Given the deepfake threat, refusing to participate in a mandatory visual verification check should be an immediate disqualification. The risk is just too high.
Red flag 4, lack of local awareness.
Right, the facilitator gives them a US IP address, but they can't give them the cultural context. If a candidate claims they're in Texas, but they can't reference the weather, the time of day, or some local event.
That's a huge indicator. So you use small talk as a verification tool.
Exactly. Man, it's snowing here in Chicago. How is it down in Austin? A moment of hesitation or a generic answer can expose the whole thing.
Red flag 5, pressure tactics.
Be very wary of candidates who try to rush the process. They ask to skip verification steps, they delay sending documents, their handlers want them placed, and earning money as fast as possible. That pressure is a signal.
And finally, red flag 6, logistical anomalies. This is after the job offer.
Yeah, things like asking for the company laptop to be sent to a weird address, the laptop farmer, constantly changing their direct deposit details. Any payroll change has to be confirmed through secure, multi-factor channels, not just a simple email.
Okay, so identity vetting is phase 1. But a really clever deepfake or proxy might get past that initial interview. So phase 2 has to be the technical controls to catch them after they're hired.
This is where IT security takes over, yeah, to detect that proxy use or an identity takeover.
First up is geolocation enforcement.
IT teams have to use stringent monitoring. They need to be analyzing login locations for suspicious IP addresses, especially clusters coming from China or Russia, when the employee is supposed to be in the US, and they have to flag impossible travel scenarios.
Like a login from New York, and then 2 hours later, a login from Shenzhen.
Exactly. Classic indicator of a compromised account or proxy use.
And how does endpoint monitoring help detect the laptop farms and those KVM devices?
You have to mandate company-issued devices that have robust endpoint detection and response EDR tools installed. And that EDR has to be configured to flag 2 critical things. First, the unauthorized installation of any RMM software, like TeamViewer.
And second, the harder one, the KVM devices. If it bypasses the OS, how can an EDR tool even see it?
The EDR won't see the KVM device directly, but it can see the activity around it. IT should be looking for the installation of weird drivers or network protocols that are associated with a tiny pilot or PKVM. And more importantly, monitoring the network logs for that sustained high-volume traffic, leaving the machine to a weird, non-corporate IP address.
The technical footprint is still there, even if the hardware is invisible to the OS.
It's traceable.
And because that initial verification can be beaten, you're saying companies need continuous verification. How does that work?
This is where you get into behavioral biometrics and anomaly detection. You establish a baseline for the employee, their typing speed, their mouse patterns, how they scroll.
A unique digital fingerprint of how they work.
Right. And any sudden deviation from that baseline, a big shift in typing style, or their login hours suddenly moving from U.S. East Coast time to Beijing time, can signal that someone else is using that account.
And finally, just protecting the IP itself.
Data loss prevention, DLP, is absolutely paramount. You have to be continuously monitoring network logs for data exfiltration. That means flagging huge amounts of data being copied to a personal Dropbox or Google Drive, and enforcing the principle of least privilege.
Only give people access to exactly what they need to do their job.
Nothing more. It minimizes the damage if an APT does get in.
So if a company does find a suspected DPRK IT worker inside their network, what is the mandatory next step for security and for legal damage control?
The immediate mandate is to investigate and then report. Any suspected scheme has to be reported immediately to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, the IC3, and to the compliance regulators, like OFAC. This is not optional.
And why is that prompt reporting so critical, especially when it comes to the sanctions liability?
Because of that strict liability regime we talked about. Promptly reporting to law enforcement and cooperating fully is always considered a mitigating factor by regulators.
So it can reduce the fines.
It can significantly reduce the civil penalties. If you find a violation, you self-report, and you help the government trace the money and the operatives, you are in a much, much better position than if they discover it first. It's critical for managing that severe legal risk.
This entire deep dive has just fundamentally changed how I think about remote work security. It's clear that identity governance and recruitment vetting, they're not just HR functions anymore.
Well,
They have become core national security and compliance challenges. They're just as important as your most advanced network firewall.
that's right. If your identity verification fails, everything else behind it, your IP, your financials, your compliance, it's all compromised.
Absolutely.
And this DPRK campaign with the AI and the deepfakes, it's just the ultimate illustration of this new world. They didn't invent the vulnerability. They just industrialized the exploitation of these universal weak points that so many companies have. Fragmented hiring, weak verification, and just a misplaced reliance on remote trust.
So the question for everyone listening is, how do you prepare not just for North Korean IT workers, but for the wave of copycats that are inevitably coming?
And they are coming. We're already seeing reports that Iranian threat actors are starting to mirror these exact techniques. This is a globally successful attack plan that other adversaries are going to adopt.
So what's the final thought? The strategic imperative.
It has to be the wholesale adoption of a robust zero-trust architecture that enforces continuous verification of every single remote worker. Zero trust isn't just a buzzword. It means continuously verifying three things. The identity, is the user who they say they are? The device, is it secure? Is it free of unauthorized KVMs? And the access, are they only touching the absolute minimum data they need?
So you have to embed that know your employee mindset into the entire life cycle of employment.
You have to. You treat every remote connection as a potential insider threat until it's proven otherwise every single time it connects. In this new world, your workforce identity is now your most crucial security asset and at the same time, your largest potential liability.
It's a sobering but absolutely vital mandate for this new era of work. We appreciate you joining us for this crucial deep dive. We'll see you next time.